Guys, we have Sarah Reardon with us again. Thank you.
So good to see you, Emily.
We just had an IG live that was so informative and so raw and real and amazing. And the feedback that we got was absolutely incredible. So we figured that we wanted to come back and spend 20 minutes or so with you and go through about 8 questions from our community because the questions keep coming in.
Okay, happy to do it. I'm excited.
Yes. So for those of you who haven't met Sarah Reardon, also known as the Vagina Whisperer, we did this IG live with her. She is a pelvic floor physical therapist, and we talked about what it is, where it is, its function, and what we can do to keep it healthy. We also talked a little bit about painful sex and other things, other aspects that can be really embarrassing and difficult to talk about, but of course, so important to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for those of you who want to know a little bit more about this, you can go to @WeAreAlma IGTV and see that conversation. You can also go to our website, wearealma.com. And yeah, let's just dive into the questions.
Let's do it.
Ready?
Yes.
So one thing that is mentioned a lot is prolapse. So can we just talk about what that is first for those that don't know?
Absolutely. And it sounds scary, scarier than it actually is. So prolapse is when your pelvic organs actually start to kind of drop a little bit lower in your pelvic cavity. So in our initial, talk together, I talked about how the pelvic floor muscles sit like a basket at the very base of your pelvis. And one of the main functions is to support your pelvic organs, kind of like a hammock. So your bladder, which holds urine, your rectum, which holds poop, and your uterus, which holds a growing fetus during pregnancy, all rest inside of there. If that hammock starts to get stretched out or lengthened a little bit or weak, those organs tend to sink down a little bit lower. So typically some of the sensations that someone would have are heaviness in the pelvis. It feels like something's falling out of their vagina. It typically gets worse at the end of the day or with activity. And, it feels like they almost want to like put their hand there so they're like hold it up. And it's typically due to a lengthening or weakening of the pelvic floor muscles.
So somebody asked, is it possible to fix prolapse without surgery?
So, as a physical therapist, what we do is we train the pelvic floor muscles. And it's not all just Kegels of tightening. Sometimes people with prolapse actually have a lot of tension in the muscle, and that's why they're pushing and straining to pee and poop all the time. And that's what causes the prolapse. So we just try to get the muscle back down to its normal resting length. So making sure that it's not too tight. And then once it's back to its normal resting length, we can start working on strengthening if that's what they need. If the level of the prolapse is above the vaginal opening, so typically we grade it like different stages, 1, 2, 3, or 4. A stage 2 and stage 1 are above the vaginal opening, like the organs are supported above the vagina, then yes, that can be helped quite significantly with exercise, activity modifications, and changing your strategies. If it's typically outside of the vagina, stage 3 or 4, that would be indicated, surgery would be indicated for that. But I still tell people something led to that, straining, weak muscle. So you still need to get rehab for that prolapse if the surgery is successful. I always say we kind of want to get to the root of what's causing this. So yes, you can absolutely improve a prolapse, the symptoms of it and the level of it with exercise, and stopping straining and modifying some of your activity.
That's amazing. So there's so much that we can do. And even if you do have surgery, it's still good to do certain exercises after that to kind of...
Yeah, because these surgeries, we want them to be successful. So if you're going to go through that, like learn the strategies that are going to help keep it successful so that you're not still straining and pushing.
Yeah. So on that topic, another woman asked what to expect with prolapse and sex.
So there can be changes in sensation. So with prolapse, if you have a prolapsed organ, say your bladder or uterus, it tends to kind of sit a little bit lower in the vaginal canal. So it may feel like your partner is pushing something, or it feels like something could be in the way. It may make you feel like you have to pee a little bit more if it's your bladder, and it feels like your partner's hitting your bladder. So you may want to think about alternative positions. So lying on your back with a couple pillows under your bottom, like kind of in that bridge position. That can kind of help your organs come back down towards your abdomen versus kind of down. So that could help with intercourse. Also lying on your side in a spooning position kind of may help with some things, or even getting on hands and knees position. So again, I think that there's things that you can do. Nobody tells us these things. We kind of think it's so black or white of like, my pelvic floor is so jacked up, I can't have sex, or I'm totally fine. And there's really a lot that you can modify to have enjoyable intercourse. With prolapse, if you do feel a decrease in sensation, then working with a pelvic floor therapist on strengthening muscles and getting kind of better tissue integrity may also be helpful.
Yes. So on the topic of sex, another question was what to do if sex is painful after baby. And I feel like it's important to talk about the fact that it's uncomfortable for most of us when we first get back to it. So let's touch on that a little bit and what can be done to help. And then there is the pain that actually continues for a long time, which is not as normal, but it definitely happens. So let's talk about those two.
I think it's a great point you bring up, Emily, that, we do anticipate some discomfort initially. But a lot of us don't know, like, well, how long is that supposed to last? And what about at 6 months? What about at a year? What about after a cesarean birth? Like, what's normal? So kind of some discomfort, some hesitation with intercourse after birth, whether a cesarean or a vaginal birth. It can be a little bit uncomfortable initially. There can be some dryness to the tissues. If you are lactating, there can be some sensitivity if you had a perineal tear or an episiotomy. However, after the first few attempts, it should start to feel more comfortable. If you continue to, after the 2, 3, 4 times of trying, it gets painful, that's a sign that something needs some attention. It could be scar tissue at the base of the vagina that could be restricted. It could be vaginal moisture that you may need to add a water-soluble lubricant, or even just moisture in between sessions. It could be cesarean scar restriction. There's actually fascial connections between the abdomen and the pelvic floor. So we often don't anticipate pelvic floor issues after a cesarean, but there can be pain with intercourse as well. So those would be times that I would say you definitely would want to not do Kegels. It's not about tightening the vagina. It's about lengthening and relaxing the muscles and tissues so that it makes intercourse enjoyable. I always say, sex shouldn't be something that's tolerable. We don't, we're tired enough as it is where we feel like we kind of just want to like check the box sometimes, but it should be enjoyable and pleasurable. And I really want to emphasize that mind shift, that it should be an us issue with a partner and not just a me issue.
Yes. And the importance that if that's your case, go see somebody, go see a physical therapist, talk to other women about it. It is a very common thing.
Yeah, it is common. And I think we just don't talk about it. Totally.
Yeah. Another question. I pee when I sneeze. What can I do?
So I'm actually at my clinic today, and I just saw, a new mom who had this. So what happens with urinary leakage with coughing or sneezing or jumping is, again, that hammock of muscles, which are your pelvic floor muscles, your bladder rests inside of there. And those pelvic floor muscles have your urinary sphincters and anal sphincters that stay closed to keep in pee and poop throughout the day. So we're not walking around leaking. With weakness or poor coordination, those muscles aren't closing when we need them to. So every time you cough or sneeze, there's pressure on that bladder, and those muscles just aren't closing to close that urinary sphincter. So again, it's not something where you just need to go do Kegels, because it could be a tension issue. The muscles could be tight. You could have scar tissue where the muscles aren't contracting well, so you're not getting that closure. But there is a little bit of work that needs to be done. Oops, sorry about that. To help, there is some work that needs to be done to make sure that the muscles can close when you need them. So I always say work with a pelvic floor physical therapist, but leakage is not normal with coughing or sneezing. It's common, but not normal. So, if you need to work on strengthening, then you will want to start doing some contractions or Kegels. But most importantly, use the muscle when you need it. Do a Kegel contraction when you cough. Do a Kegel contraction when you sneeze, so that it will prevent the leakage from happening, and you can close that sphincter better.
I'll never forget, I had just had Maya. I think 4 months after I had my first baby, I felt like I needed to learn how to box. Don't ask me why. And you know how they warm up. It's jump rope.
Oh yeah.
Just jumping away and just realizing this is a horrible, horrible idea.
Yeah.
Because 4 months after, I really had to give some love and do some exercises down there, and it totally helped. But yeah, it's not a fun feeling to be leaking. It's just not.
And I think that it's so common. So we want to be like, okay, this is kind of normal. What happens? But if we don't, and we're in our 30s or 40s and we're experiencing this, I'm always like, well, what are my 60s and 70s going to be like? And so, like any other muscles in your body, we have to train them to meet the demand of what we're asking. I don't jump rope, so my pelvic floor muscles don't need to sustain that pressure. But for someone who is, we need to train our muscles to meet the demand of that pressure.
Right. Let's see. We touched on this a little bit, but here's a question. I had a C-section. Do I need to worry about my pelvic floor?
Great question. So the research is showing that actually a lot of changes in the pelvic floor happen during pregnancy itself. So if you think about that hammock, as babies are growing, that hammock gets lengthened and stretched out. Again, and also constipation is really common during pregnancy. So if you're straining and pushing, that can also further weaken the muscle. So regardless of what type of birth you had, you may still experience some pelvic floor issues. Now, definitely it's not going to be the same as someone who had an episiotomy or had to use forceps or a vacuum for a vaginal birth. But you may experience some pelvic floor changes like weakness. But more often we tend to see some pain and restriction after cesarean births because that abdominal scar tissue can get tight. I really encourage working on cesarean scar massage, breathing activities, a lot of yoga to kind of open up the abdominal wall after it's been so tight and restricted.
That's great. And which pelvic floor exercises are safe while pregnant?
There's nothing that's not unsafe. So when it comes to the health of your baby, nothing's going to really harm your baby. When it comes to the health of the mom, nothing's going to really harm your mom. What I like to think about is the first trimesters, first and second, to really work on stability, more on strengthening. You don't need to walk around doing Kegel exercises all the time, but just, again, maintaining good health, not straining when you poop, hydrating well to have good bladder habits, eating healthy foods, and just exercising, whatever your normal exercise is. But if you start leaking or having pain, you modify and adapt. You don't kind of just keep pushing through. That third trimester, I really like to focus on relaxation of the pelvic floor. So again, these muscles are that basket, and your pelvic floor muscles don't push the baby out when you're giving birth. Your uterus pushes the baby out. We just need those muscles to kind of get out of the way, and relaxation and lengthening of those muscles help. So yoga poses, doing a deep squat to relax the muscles, using a massage ball externally in your glutes and your thighs to keep those muscles soft. All those, in perineal massage, something to kind of massage the base of the vagina to get those muscles soft and relaxed.
Yes. The perineal massage is so great. And you do that on yourself.
You can do it on yourself. You can have a partner do it to you. I mean, I'm in this field, so I'm pretty cozy with this part of my body. But when I was pregnant, I told my husband, I was like, hey, this is 35 weeks. We got to start this. And he did it to me. And I was like, he goes, I don't really like this. And I was like, I don't really like it either. I'll just do it to myself. So it's different. Whatever works for anybody. Like, if you want to include your partner, if you want to do it on yourself, if you don't have a partner, you can do it on yourself.
Yeah.
Lots of options.
I did it on myself and it was so great and so incredibly helpful. I did not tear with either baby, and I absolutely believe that that's why.
I think that's
because it's massage.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. So I believe it too.
You just use an oil and you do it, and it's so easy. There's one more question here. Where did it go? Somewhere on my paper. There it is. Might be a little hard to answer this one because it depends on the person and the situation, but it's on average, what can women who are going to physical therapy for pelvic floor issues expect time-wise? Like, how soon can you expect to feel a difference? And of course, it depends on what you're dealing with,
right. But that's a great question though, because I also think that this could be a little bit, like mystical, like what is pelvic floor therapy? And, these muscles are like any other muscles in your body. As a PT, we work with muscles, and I just work with these muscles. So I tell people what to expect. The first session, you come in and we chat for a while. It's a lot of information gathering. And the initial assessment is I assess your abdominal wall, your low back, your hips. I assess externally. And then, I do an internal vaginal assessment to access the pelvic floor muscles internally, if someone's comfortable with that. Oftentimes, if they're not, we can wait until another session. So, depending on what they're coming in for, if it's a little bit of light leakage or, mild discomfort with intercourse or hip pain, it could be, once a week for 6 weeks. I would say most people we see somewhere between 3 to 6 months. I don't see people 2 to 3 times a week like traditional physical therapy. I see them maybe once a week or maybe once every 2 weeks to start. Once they start getting better, I reduce it to every 3 weeks and then every 4 weeks. I'm really big on giving you the tools to help yourself at home. Making a doctor's appointment's hard. Also, I think that if we can equip you to help yourself, then if something were to change down the line, you've got this toolbox of tools to help you. And a lot of it's things that you can modify at home. It's just modify your exercises here, or do these exercises or stretches there, or change the way you're sleeping or sitting, and use a support belt. So it's the other, 23 hours of the day that you're not here that matter the most, and not the 1 hour a week that you see me. So, but I would say somewhere between 3 to 6 months is probably a general range. If it's a long-term issue, it could be a little bit longer, but most often it's something that can be really remedied in that time period.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah. You know what? I've been squatting every time I brush my teeth now. So
God.
I'm sitting on my little squishy ball, and I'd go down in that deep squat while I brush my teeth. And I love it so much.
Awesome. I mean, it's an amazing hip opener. It relaxes the pelvic floor. It keeps us limber, helps you poop. So, all of those things. And again, these are just little things. Again, you bring it into your day and it becomes part of your lifestyle to help maintain your health.
Yep. Yeah. I love that idea of, teaching us how to fish. Instead of just handing us the fish. It's better because then we can take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. And it makes it sustainable. We teach our kids, and then we have better outcomes for the future.
Yeah, so true. You are such a gem, Sarah. This was amazing.
Great to see you. Great to talk to everyone. I hope this was helpful.
Yeah. Thank you to all of you who sent in questions. And I'm sure we'll be back here and talk some more about this and dig deep into it. But thank you all. Have an amazing day.
Bye. Take care.